It's all about experience, experience, experience. It's time for experience. It's about experience, experience. Prepare yourself for experience. Lead devotees to victory with authentic connectivity. Build your brand on the wings of an eagle. Watch your fandom soar. With mind-blowing experience, you're making your customers delirious. If they try to tune you out, you'll innovate like never before. Experience, experience, experience.
If you had a headache in Atlanta in 1886, you would have gone to Jacob's Pharmacy, where you could buy for 5 cents the beverage that today is worth over $300 billion. Today, Coca-Cola is a brand synonymous with happiness. In the food service industry, it's the brand that moves with the meal, enhancing every dining experience and owning the customer's thirst one cup at a time. And Kathy, I'm so excited to talk to you, who are just an amazing leader at Coca-Cola. Funny, so did some digging, and you shared some of your story with me previously. So currently SVP, West Coast Food Service on Premise, and you had an entire career at Coca-Cola.
I have. Long time.
Which has been an amazingly successful career.
Years, a long, long time, yeah.
So 1989, Coca-Cola had a market cap of $11.6 billion.
Yeah.
In 2025, that market cap is $307 billion. Yeah,
I'd like to take personal credit for that growth.
26x increase. And if we're talking about like correlation and causation, I think we're leaning into causation here. So you've directly grown a couple $100 billion of market cap for Coca-Cola.
Yeah, there might be some other people that would disagree with that, because we are going to talk about the power of the collective. So let's just say I'm very glad to have been a part of that growth.
Yes.
It's been amazing to see the changes over so many years.
Something I so appreciate about Coca-Cola is just the emphasis on teamwork and the way that like people come together, and it's always about like, it's you, not I, it's the team, it's the impact, like refresh the world. When you think about, you've grown as a leader in different seasons of leadership. When you think about like going all the way back to like, you're about to join Coca-Cola, like if you go back and like tell yourself, like what would be like the one thing you'd like, the advice that you'd give to your pre-Coca-Cola self before you started this journey?
Well, here's the funny thing. So right out of college, I joined a bank, and I was an advertising major, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Who knows at that point?
Florida State.
At Florida State. Go Noles.
Yeah.
And so I joined a bank, and I was the first one to leave my training class because I was like, what have I done? Like, this is so not me. So I started having lunches with people, and this was my early introduction to the power of networking. And first of all, to the kindness and openness to people that were older than me at that time to sit down with me and give me guidance and advice, because I was trying to regroup on what I wanted to do. And then as fate would have it, a random friend that I'd known through high school was like, hey, he was living in Atlanta. He goes, I hear Coca-Cola's hiring. I'm like, oh, well, I don't know, maybe I'll try that out. And went up to that interview really just not that serious about it, because I had had another offer from an advertising agency. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go into advertising. And I go up to that interview, and next thing you know, I had an offer. And I remember thinking, no, I'm good. I already have this other job. I'm good to go. And the gentleman at the ad agency was just this super amazing person, and we had become friends. And I told him about this offer. He was like, man, he's like, Kathy, I would love to have you here, but it's Coca-Cola. Are you sure? And I was like, no, maybe I'm not sure. And so I called Coke back and I said, hey, is that offer still good? Thankfully, they said yes. And so I got on a one-way ticket from Florida out to California, not knowing anyone and feeling the weight of this step, and thought, I'll try this for a while. And this July, it'll be 36 years. So who knew? And I'm telling you my story. I haven't really answered your question yet, but like, what would I tell that person? I think I would tell them, like, be open to what emerges. We are living in a situation where life emerges, and we love to plan. We love to have it all mapped out. Like, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I did not know when I said yes to this that it was going to blossom the way that it has. And I'm so grateful. So I would tell anyone, just trust the process, trust it.
This is fascinating. So you had a job lined up, and the guy who was trying to hire you looked at you and said, hey, maybe you should take this other. Like,
He did.
When you think about, like, we talk a lot about authentic connections, and like at the end of the day, whether it's business or life, like we all get further faster when we're like for other people and not just for ourselves.
Yeah.
And like, man, there's some selflessness there too.
Totally.
Like, what an incredible, like, sacrificial leadership style to look at you and say, and like change the trajectory of your life. And like, you probably would have had an incredible career if you had gone the other way, but to have the vision to say like, no, what's best for Kathy may not be what's best for me right now.
Yeah.
But I'm going to choose to lean into what's best for her and trust that that's going to be.
He totally did. And it was also the power of Coke's brand. It's like, it's Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Like, are you sure you don't want to go have this experience? And it really hit me like, you're right. And him, as well as all those people who took the time to meet with me, and they were busy leaders and executives, and they sat down to give me their advice. And people are so generous in that way. And at this point in my career, I definitely try to do the same. If someone reaches out and wants my advice or my perspective, I will give it all day, because I remember the people that did it for me.
The power of just paying it forward in that way.
Yeah.
So you end up at Coke. It's 100+ year old brand, and I'm sure there's almost like the MBA of an education that you get when you kind of like when you think about just like the principles that you learn that laid the foundation for the career that you had. Like, what were some of the years 0 to 5 or 0 to 10 learnings that were formational for you as you thought about being a great leader, being an incredible business person, brand builder?
Yeah. There's so many. And one of the things that I would say too, even with my journey with Coke, is that we look at the brand, we look at all the great things about any organization, but whenever I'm interviewing people and they ask me like, why have you been here for so long? I always say it's the people, because the people and you've met several people who work for the company. Everyone that I have encountered over all this time and all the different geographies, it doesn't matter what city, what team I was on, such integrity, such quality. These people have become like my family. Times in life when things got really tough, when I had personal challenges, the company always had my back. And whenever I had headhunters call me, I would weigh the opportunity, but it's like, but how do I replace these incredible people?
It goes beyond the paycheck.
That have been there for me. I mean, that's just the truth. So getting back to what have I learned? There's a ton, but if I were to boil it down to maybe 3 different things. The first one I would say is that transformation begins with yourself. And right now there's a lot of conversations out there in the industry about, how do we transform? How do we innovate? What's the next step? The pace of change has never been so incredible as it is right now. But I would say to anyone, it all begins with you. So I think we'll talk about the Compassion Lab, but the foundation of that work is the inner landscape. Some people say as within, so without.
Yes.
So what we're creating as far as our inner resilience, our level of integrity and value will always be reflected on the outside. So I would tell people, like, work on yourself, make sure that you're clear about who you are, how you want to show up, how do you want to be in service, and stay consistent with that throughout, and it will yield incredible dividends. So that would be one. The second one would really be the power of the collective. We are not supposed to walk alone. That is not, sometimes you feel alone, you might be in a challenge and it feels like it's just you against the world, but it is not. Working for a big company or small, there are people that help you, and we need to ask for help. We need to nurture those relationships, seek out to understand what are our superpowers? What do we all have to offer? Because we are absolutely better together. And you hear that a lot, but you have to cultivate it. You have to be with it. And then probably the last one with the 3 would be this whole idea of being a curious observer. Because There's drama in business and drama in life, but if you can step back and be the observer of like, what's going on here? What's happening inside myself, going back to that inner work? Why am I triggered? Why is this not working? What's dysfunctional? Where's the breakdown? And if you stay curious about that, you don't have to get sucked into the drama. You become a detective of the situation and figure out, how do I straighten this winding road into something that is going to make sense for all the parties involved? And it really becomes an enjoyable journey versus a stressful one because you're asking different questions. So that's kind of what I would say.
That's so good. So it's like inside out. Start inside out, like start in before you look out. And then, yeah, we talk a lot about inside out brands, but I think there's a principle like inside out leadership too, where like you got to be squared away.
For sure.
And in the right headspace and be grounded and have a sense of identity.
Absolutely.
To be more effective in getting to the collective. And man, all right, when you think about, you've had a fun purview into seeing just incredible, we'll call it inside out brands that have gone and, you know, had a strong sense of identity. They've been about something bigger than just bottom line. Yeah. And when you think about just like the principles that have made up the most impressive brands that you've gotten to see or partner with, like what have been the principles that have been most impressive to you?
Yeah. You know, it's funny as you're asking the question, it's not that different from even thinking about who you are as a personal brand. And I don't really like the phrase personal brand, but it's an easy jump to understand the connection that I'm making between who we choose to be and who a brand chooses to be. And the commonalities for me are those consistent levels of integrity. So any brand that knows exactly, you know, this is what I stand for. This is who I am as a brand.
Yes.
This is how I'm going to show up. This is how I'm going to tell my stories. This is the experiences I want to create for my consumers. Any great brand, and there's a long list of them that we can look at, have shown that level of consistency over time. They consistently show up in a way where the consumer knows who they are and what that experience means to them. And it's true for us. It's true as a leader.
Yes.
The greatest leaders are consistent. You know what to expect. They don't switch gears all the time and leave you wondering. They're very clear about their stand and how they're going to serve. Same for both.
And you also trust that they're going to stand for something bigger. Like they'll consistently stand for something bigger. And so, you know, whether it's a leader or a brand, when they do something you might not perfectly agree with, you know that their aim is true. Yeah. It's not always self-serving.
Absolutely. I mean, once you decide who you're going to be, you have to follow through. And that doesn't mean you're going to please everybody.
Yes.
You know, because I think a brand or a human who tries to be all things to all people will surely fail, because you cannot do that well.
All right. So you mentioned the Compassion Lab, so I want to dive in there for a second. So you've done a lot of valuable but fun things in your career as you've thought about how do we like start with yourself, maybe like who am I as a leader, who is Coca-Cola, and how do we come and like bring authentic value? When you think about the process of the Compassion Lab and how it went from an inception to something that's been impactful to lives in business and beyond, what's the Compassion Lab story? Yeah,
and thank you for asking, because of course it's a passion point for me. But, you know, we all have a story. So we were just talking about brands and storytelling. And for all of us, we are so defined by our stories. And we are led to where we are in our lives because of things that have happened to us in the past. And for me, whether it was, you know, illness, going through various things when I was younger that made me be that observer that I talked about, like, wait a minute, like what's going on? That's what really put the passion in me about we've got to have a different conversation about the whole person, not just who we are in our brains, which is a very Western thing, like it's the mind, but who are we, mind, body, spirit in total, right? Now, when COVID hit, I think that things that used to be a little bit more covert became overt. There was a lot of conversations about our mental well-being, levels of anxiety. If you look at the stats at that time, depression, all these things went up exponentially. And in the past, it was kind of separation of work and your personal life. Like you came to work, you put on the mask, you did what you had to do. But as our consciousness evolves, it becomes where the workplace, where we spend a whole lot of time, is also a place where we need to show up fully human, and to know that we're in a community and that we are not alone. Going back to that, the power of the collective. It's the same story here. So the lab was born of a desire to bring this conversation into the workplace, that we are whole people. It is mental, it is emotional. We have to be resilient and strong to meet the demands of the world that we live in. And that's really manifested and still is developing over the last 5 years in what we do internally with the programming.
Courage is an interesting concept. And I imagine the evolution of having people show up as their true selves, and then maybe taking a forward lead and being a voice to talking about the importance of like how has the idea of courage been of value to you, and how have you thought about using courage in the process that you've been on in the Compassion Lab?
Yeah. Courage is foundational. I mean, we cannot live in today's world without having a level of boldness and the courage. Well, it's the courage to be seen. As I think about the work in the lab, we get into vulnerabilities. You wouldn't believe how many people in business, no matter what level you are, have an inner critic, have imposter syndrome, have questions about their value and whether they belong. People who, if you met them in the boardroom, you'd think they were incredibly powerful, strong people, but then you find out that there's this inner voice that is chipping away, at that confidence level. And so it takes a lot of courage to do that inner work and to look at that, because people think this is, it's soft, or it's, it's fuzzy, or it's lighthearted. No, it's not. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's much easier to zone out, just, Netflix all day and go grab a beer or a glass of wine and not look at the things that make you uncomfortable. But when you have the courage to do that, then everything opens up. Everything changes for you. And that's where the power really is.
All right, so there's just so many parallels between leadership and brand building. And so like a lot of the courage it takes to look internally as a leader or just as a human being, like it's maybe even harder to do that when you have the social influence of a leader within a business. And the taking an honest assessment of where are we now, where are we falling short, and not just you having to come face to face with it in the mirror. It's you coming face to face with the mirror while everybody else sees it as well. When you think about, you kind of do inside out leadership building, and then you go as like you develop yourself as a leader, and then you move from to inside out leadership building in like a more social context. How has that played in like how you've shown up in a peer-to-peer, working with the people around you?
Yeah, well, the truth of the matter, Aaron, is when you see a leader being vulnerable, now you don't want to see a leader like breaking down in a pool of tears, having no idea which end is up, because then you're like, I'm a little concerned now about following. But when a leader is vulnerable to a place, it's like, hey, I don't really know the answer, or hey, I struggle with that too, if they're in a conversation with their team member. Think about like the exhale that creates within the team and within the person, because there's no perfection. No one has all the answers. And suddenly when you realize like, oh, everybody is trying to figure this out just like I am, that opens a space for creativity. That opens a space for more safety. If I'm a leader and I come across as if I have every answer, then that's kind of an intimidating place to play from. And so to me, I think there's magic in bringing that human space into the workforce so that we all feel seen. And that's where things can emerge from there.
The point 3 of 3 that you made earlier was like being hyper curious, like a curiosity. How do you think about moving from, all right, I'm gonna start inside on myself, and then at some point I transition, and there's probably like, it's like a ebb and flow, or like converge, diverge, like we're always like coming in and out of each. I'd imagine push back on me if there's a better perspective there. Genuinely would love to know. But how do you think about, oftentimes they say like the most interesting person is the most interested person. It's the cliche, but how do you think about curiosity and how to show up in a curious way? And it's, it's individual specific, but there are principles that I think are true of all types of curious people.
Agreed. To me, it comes back to a few things, and one of them is presence. Because if we're caught up in our mind, if we're caught up in what happened yesterday, might be in the workforce, it might be personally, or we're anxious about what's going to happen tomorrow, we're not here right now. And the creation happens right here, right now. This conversation is a co-creation. We're literally letting what emerges between us through the conversation. So if I'm curious, I have to be present to see. Because if I'm all caught up in past and future, I'm actually not even with you. And it's really hard for me to be curious.
In the conversation right now, like, how am I making sure I'm not trying to jump ahead, go back? Like,
Yeah.
how do I stay right here, right now?
Yeah. And it's not easy. I know from being an interviewer
Yes.
myself, you are toggling between like really receiving what's happening, but also knowing where you want to steer the conversation.
Yes.
And that's a challenge, right? But if you've ever been with someone who's fully present and not all caught up in what I have to sound like or do or say or be, they see things that other people don't see. And when you are that curious observer, you can watch what's happening in any situation in the unfolding because you're taking yourself almost out of it. You're almost watching it like a movie. And you're able to be like, this is so fascinating. Even if it's a disaster, even if everything is falling down, you can say, wow, like how did this get so wrong so fast? Because think of the power in that stance versus, oh my gosh, how did this happen? Oh, and how is this going to affect me? And this is going to be, and you're all in your head, and you can't see when you're in that fight or flight situation. And so this curiosity means I can see more and I can ask a different question. And questions are the key to everything. Is what's the question that you're asking?
I think question asking is a skill. I've seen people that I work with or clients, like an evolution of getting better at asking questions. And I think that, and we're riffing in real time here, like I think that there's you get better by starting with building the capacity to ask more questions.
Yeah.
And then you become more self-aware of which question, how do I get to, better questions that get to the heart of it more quickly? How do I get to there's an interesting evolution of question asking as a skill.
There is.
And I might argue it's maybe the number one skill to have in life, going back to curiosity.
It was one of the biggest aha moments when I went through an executive leadership coaching program. And I think I got really used to, as a leader, people would come to me with a situation. And we've all heard in leadership, like, what would you do? And, you really let them come up with a solution. But it's also very common to be like, hey, have you thought about this? Or here's a resource over here, because you want to help. Yeah. Everybody wants to help. But I learned in coaching that everything is about your questions, because the wisdom exists inside of all of us already. It doesn't mean we can't take little hints along the road, but we really do have a lot of that wisdom. The questions pulls that out of the individual. So you're absolutely right, Erin. Asking great questions is the seed of probably, I think, the greatest emergence, because you don't start out with knowing the answer. I've had times where I've been in a meeting or with someone and a situation comes up, and my knee-jerk might be, I know what to do. And I'll be like, wait, there might be a better way. Let's ask a new question. And a lot of times we did come up with a better way.
I remember being in business school, and they just wear you out with the idea of networking. It's like network.
Right,
it's
right.
Every day after class was like a networking thing.
Of course.
And I remember feeling this pressure of you need to go in and you need to have interesting stories and you need to go and tell people interesting things. And simultaneously was dating my now wife, and her dad is, I admire him for a lot of reasons. He just has this gift of being able to get to know a person very quickly by asking questions. And there's this vulnerability with question asking. People can reject you, they cannot lean in, but it's the quickest way to get to know somebody is asking them questions. Yeah. And there's this incredible unlock, as I saw him just really build strong relationships with people through questions and be there's a better way to show up into a new situation with new people. If you just come in and be curious and lead with questions, and you get way more interesting experiences, interesting relationships, opportunity. It's really the unlock too. all the
Well-
things.
Well, at a fundamental level, we all want to be seen and understood. That's just a human need. So if you show up with someone and you really are interested in their story, in their journey, and what they care about, how do you think that's going to make them feel versus you walking in with like this announcement of all the things that you want to tell them about you? And it doesn't mean there isn't a give and take and there's the dance of that conversation, but it's really true. The power, the real secret with networking is to be curious and just seek to understand, like, who is this human in front of me and what's their story and what can I learn from them? It's so fantastic.
I think questions in some ways like build communities. Like when you find people who are asking similar questions,
Oh, yeah.
it builds connections. And I see you in a lot of ways as an incredible community builder, whether it's within the Coca-Cola community, within, you know, for the customers that you get to serve.
Yeah.
And I've seen it beyond. I think CMO Summit might have been some of like the
Oh yeah.
community building coming through. Like when you think about like the initial connecting points of how the CMO Summit came to be and that evolution, like what's the story there?
Yeah, well, that's another project near and dear to my heart. You know, and the CMO Summit was launched, it was pre-COVID. So it was launched in 2011 and it ran for 9 years. And it was our attempt at creating really what I would call scaled value through community relationship from customers. Because one of the real amazing things about our company is we work with we have a lot of partnerships. We have a lot of different customers. So how can we be of value, not just one by one, but to the entire community? So the summit was created for, yes, pure networking. That's what a lot of industry-based things do. But it was also this really special time for these professionals to not only gain intellectual capital from speakers and experiences that we were curating for them, but to understand the challenges of the industry with each other and to come together. And we really found that every year that community grew. We had certain customers that were there every single year. Others came and went. But we saw the power of it. And we're going to be doing more of that in the future because I think it's actually our responsibility to be a builder of community. If you look at Coca-Cola's DNA across the entire world, we are about building community and creating experiences that bring people together. That's in the DNA of our brand. And so we should be doing that for our customers too. We should be a connector for them so they can all be more powerful together.
There's this idea of the paradox of scale and things that scale largest and fastest oftentimes start with like a really narrow focus.
Yeah.
There's this like, there's Instacart is a funny story. Like their origin is they started Instacart where you order your groceries online.
Yeah.
And they had a problem where Trader Joe's was one of the places their initial customer base wanted to order grocery from, but Trader Joe's didn't have pictures of their products online at the time.
Yeah.
And they knew that pictures of product were really important to their customers. And so their founder went to a Trader Joe's, bought every single product in the Trader Joe's, took it to a photo studio that day, took pictures with his own camera of every single product. It's a true story.
I did not know that.
And
That's crazy.
uploaded those and
Wow.
kind of like took the risk of like Trader Joe's might not like this, but we're going to risk it because our customers want it. Uploaded it on, like went berserk, then went to Costco and did the same thing
Wow.
of like Costco doesn't have pictures at the time. We'll buy everything at Costco. We'll upload it onto our website so our customers can come on,
Yeah.
order from their favorite retail experiences and see what they're ordering ahead of time to feel validated in the purchase.
Yeah,
And so like,
it's
it's the
amazing.
idea of like that thing, which like if you wrote up a business plan to scale a business, you would not say go and buy every single product at this grocery store and then
No.
take a picture of it by hand,
No.
upload it by hand. Like that does not feel scalable.
No.
Yet it was the thing it's a paradox of scale.
Yeah.
Coca-Cola in my mind is such an incredible vision of that. You have, you know, the largest global brand, but still find this way to make very emotional, authentic connections in a way that feels very personal and like anti-scale, even though it's probably the reason why there's been so much scale. When I hear you talk about the CMO, I'm seeing like this incredible ability to have a massive business, but to see beyond scale and say like, no, what's foundational to our success are these moments that maybe would get overlooked in a business plan, but are deeply human, and we need to make this connection because this matters a whole lot.
Yeah, what you're saying is important and very true. And I think any structure, any organization, big or small, but I think sometimes we think about big companies as just like this thing, it's
This entity.
It's an entity, right? It's an organization, but it's just people. Everyone, even within big structures, you have all of these micro structures. You have many cultures within a company based on the leaders of that group. For brands, people have Coca-Cola stories because they'll have traveled maybe to Africa and they got a Coke out in the middle of nowhere from a local vendor, and that's their livelihood.
Yeah.
And so these stories permeate all these countries because it's an enterprise of humanity. It's an enterprise of people. Our purpose is to, refresh the world and make a difference. I've often thought we're a company that is a global force for good that happens to also sell beverages, because at the end of the day, that's what we are doing. And full circle to my comments about why I've stayed and the people of this organization. If you, as a consumer, go to a brand or you work for a company, what is your experience? Do you feel, what's the patterns here in our conversation? Do you feel seen? Do you feel heard? Do you feel known? Brands that succeed, their consumers feel that relationship. Companies that succeed, their associates feel that relationship, that it matters. There's this sense of belonging. So yeah, I think it's fascinating, to really think about what is truly happening versus sometimes what we think is happening on the surface.
We talk a lot about experiences, and we've kind of have our short list of, we call them the principles of a remarkable experience. And the second of those 6 principles is delivering personalization. And in today's day and age, everybody wants to jump to all right, we have a lot of data. Let's run it through some LLM and AI, and it'll deliver this personalized experience. I think where it really starts from is old fashioned, hey, human to human.
Yeah.
How do I deliver a caring, welcome space?
Yeah.
It's all, Danny Meyer, Will Guidara, Enlightened Hospitality.
Oh, absolutely.
When you think about, broadly, let's go kind of consumer brands across the board. When you think about brands that you're seeing or experiences that you've had, we're saying man, this group of people, and maybe it's not even a consumer brand, maybe it's a group or a community that's creating an incredibly welcoming space that feels personalized, and better said, it's a space where it feels like that you were anticipated before you got there. How have you seen that come to life in an effective way?
I almost tie it back to the conversation we had about presence and curiosity, because you talked about the Instacart example. If a brand is really focused on their consumer and their guest and what they want to create, the people behind that brand, I guarantee you they're curious. I guarantee you they're present to what they're creating. They're not just doing it haphazard, because it won't work if it's haphazard. It only works when the people behind that have the passion and the vision and the understanding, this is what we're going to create. And it also, full circle, comes back to that knowing who they want to be, what type of experience they want to curate, and how does that come to life, right? In all these different ways. So it's being intentional. Yeah. And we have toggled back and forth in this conversation between companies, organizations, and people. But a lot of the same rules apply, because are you intentional about what you are doing, about your path, about your service, about the experiences that everybody has of you or your organization? To me, that's where it all comes back to every single time.
There's a great quote. It's something to the effect of, businesses don't succeed or fail, people do. And it's just understanding at the end of the day, as much as there's a brand and a logo and a visual identity system, humans. There are human beings
behind it, yeah,
making decisions, human beings coming and going, human beings going through different seasons of life in
Right.
the brand or in their own life. Like
Right.
it's this living, breathing thing
It
that
is.
evolves and changes
It
over
is.
time.
Yeah. And it's why it's not easy.
Yes.
Because
You never make it. You never make
humans
it.
are, constantly changing, and you think, oh, I've cracked the code, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then they go left, and you think they're going to go right. And so that's why it's so fascinating in this industry and any industry, is because you're always trying to figure out, like, what's that sweet spot between who I am and what I bring, and then what the consumer needs.
Yes.
So you're always, recalibrating that, and
Yeah.
that's the fun, right?
It's yeah. So emotion is an interesting principle. I think. A lot of people we were talking in the beginning about being vulnerable.
Yeah.
A lot of people treat emotion as a negative thing or something to be totally controlled and never let out of bounds. But it's also an incredible tool to create connect. Like, we're emotional beings, and we connect emotionally.
Yeah.
And those are the strongest connections in
Yeah.
a beneficial way. When you think about, the power of emotional connections and the role that you've seen it play professionally, whether as a leader or in a brand context, how has like building strong emotional connections been a valuable thing for you?
Because we are built to connect. That is our nature. That is primal within us. So, whether I talk about the power of the collective moments ago, about the power of presence and how we show up, you are going to want to have these connections with people that it's a symbiosis type situation. It's a give and it's a take, and it's a investment in you. I'm invested in you. The gentleman who told me, "Are you sure you don't want to go work for Coca-Cola?" was invested more in me than in his business. And if you look at the relationships in your life, personally and professional, and you can go through and be like, wow, like, how does this relationship really nurture me in different ways? It might be through the brain and the intellect. It might be through the heart, but everyone is coming together doing their thing. And so we are creatures of emotion, and the curious observer means I can still do this in a way that keeps me in a steadiness. So it's not a roller coaster ride, but we're built for this emotion. We're built, people want to feel love. They want to feel belonging. It used to be crazy to use the word love at work, but we do use it more now. I'm so glad that we do. One of our customers has a big, the artwork of love in their parking lot.
Yes.
And we talk about brand love. And before we hit record, we talked about the parenting journey and what love is there. I mean, it stitches everything together. And if you become emotionless, then it's empty. You don't have that.
There's this definition of love. It was like 5 years ago. I read it in a book. Love is willing self-sacrifice for the good of another without demanding reciprocation, or that the person being loved is deserving. And so it was this incredibly powerful perspective shift on like the end of the day, like you talked about, like parent love and the ability to like think sacrificially of like,
Right.
to my detriment, I want this person to be better off.
Right.
And how that translates, to your point, across how you show up with the people around you day to day, whether they're family members or they're coworkers, teammates, or if it's like, hey, we get to serve people through a business sense, and let's be about, self-sacrifice for them in a positive way.
Yeah. But I just have to add something really important to this conversation. I already talked about it all begins with yourself. And for anyone listening to this conversation, I mean, I know we kind of veered off into this like topic of love, which, was not in our framework, but
we got there.
Talking about love, but we got there. But this love for self, what I see as an epidemic in our world, and we talk about it a lot in the Compassion Lab, is the ability to have compassion and love for self. And when you truly have that, you're going to do the right things for yourself. You're gonna nurture the whole being, which, by the way, we had this today on the Compassion Lab speaker series. We had an amazing speaker talking about what happens in our biology, and it affects the way we think and how we decide and how we connect. And it's a ripple effect all the way out to the world. So we have to learn as we raise our consciousness in life and business how to really fully love who we are ourselves so that we can love others and show up in our best. If we don't do that, we will not get where we need to go. There's no way. So yeah.
It starts with Inside Out.
It does. It's always.
That's where it comes
right.
back to Inside Out.
It's always back in that. I don't know if we have a Disney trademark in using that, but I mean,
Is that the movie? I didn't even put that together.
Yeah,
the
Inside Out,
movie,
but
yes.
yeah, it is. But it is all
It's a great
starts
movie.
with yourself.
Have you seen Inside Out?
I saw the first one when the boys were little, but I haven't seen the latest one. I have to stream it.
It is so good.
Yeah.
It's
It's
worth seeing.
amazing. Yeah, it's amazing what they do.
We watched it a couple months ago.
It's great.
It was A+. They do a great job over there. It's Pixar, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
All right, let's land here. Favorite brand experiences in the last couple of years that you've personally experienced? Any industry, like you are I hate the word consumer. We often use the word guest as a translation. It's just a more humanizing word.
Yeah.
So any experience where you've been a guest of a business or you walked away feeling like cared for and like, man, this was different in a really fun way.
Yeah. There's not just one that comes to mind. There's not just one, because there's so many good brands out there, but there's a quality of that experience that I always feel. And we've talked about human connection a ton, but usually it's because I've connected with somebody. Maybe it's in person, maybe it's online, doesn't even have to be in person. And they have been present to what I need and they have solved my problem and they really seem to have a passion for what they're doing and that is infectious and you feel that. I notice that if I'm in a restaurant brand, if I'm one of my customers and I see how they're bringing that vision alive, it might be, there was a clothing brand that I ordered from. A friend of mine had said, hey, check this company out. I ordered something. They were all about sustainable fashion, not fast fashion, and something didn't work. And I'm like, how do I send it back? They're like, no, keep it. Order something else because we're standing by. We don't want you to have to mail this back. And I was so shocked. I'm like, what do you mean keep it? Like,
Yeah.
Okay. But it was that Will Guidara, like unreasonable, like seriously. So I think when surprise and delight comes in, you're just like, whoa, like that's super cool. Cause we all have experiences where we were like, hello, is anybody there? That kind of thing. So yeah.
That is so good. I was, give a local shout out. I told you I was at Escuela Taqueria.
Yeah.
And you talk about surprise and delight. Like you sit down and like this fast service. Like I don't think my glass of water like ever went below halfway on the cup. It was like, it got to halfway, immediate pour, like super friendly, super engaging. Like there's times I feel like brands lose sight of the fact that you exist to serve people. Yeah. And sometimes customers can start to feel like a nuisance instead of the purpose. And it's like when you have a culture that's instilled this sense of like being people first, that communicates something to the entire team. And that's where you really get like the special magic of like people finding ways to be like, no, I'm going to stop what I'm doing over here because somebody needs help over here.
Yeah. And people who are seen and heard can help see and hear other people, just like you always hear people hurt others. You never know what's going on. And so even when we rolled the Compassion Lab, it was geared towards our people and our associates, because I feel like as we help them thrive and take care of them, they can take care of our customers. And we certainly have some customers who've engaged in the work, but you go into a brand and you can see how are those people being taken care of based on how they interact with you. Now, there are exceptions to that because everyone's going through their own journey, of course. But in general, what is your experience of that brand and what type of culture do they create for their people?
Where did the Compassion and Compassion Lab, where did that name come from?
I named it, but really, I landed on compassion because it is such a foundational aspect, because to be compassionate is to put yourself into the shoes of others, to truly extend your experience into understanding other people's experiences and honoring their experiences. And so if we seek to, level up our consciousness, especially in a world that is so divided right now on this side versus that. We have to elevate to a place that says, I am for all humans' experiences, all beings' experiences. And how do I do that? So I just think it's the right foundational world for where we want to go.
Compassion Lab, building compassion leaders and brands. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Absolutely.
Well, Kathy, I've just so enjoyed getting to hang
it's
out
been
and
great.
appreciate you welcoming me into the Los Angeles community this week. It's been so much fun, and just appreciate the leader you are and the friendship we've gotten to form. And
well, thank you. Clearly the work you do, the work Addo does, I mean, is all about creating incredible experiences. And the more we talk about it and understand what's the makeup of that, the more we can create it for the future. So thank you so much.
You're the best.
Yeah. All right.